Now, our top story of the hour. We start in Europe, and the French government has condemned a US visa ban on Thierry Breton, former European Commissioner and key architect of the EU's Digital Services Act. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot called the move strongly unacceptable after the Trump administration imposed bans on Breton and other European figures. The US claims these individuals are involved in censoring American social media platforms. Breton, who helped drive the EU's regulations, defended the Digital Services Act, calling it a democratic decision with no extraterritorial reach. He also criticised the visa ban, questioning whether it was a return to McCarthy-style tactics. Joining us now is Peter Baum. He is the editor of the Weekly Blitz, and he joins us live from London. Peter, thank you very much for joining us in this discussion. Peter, of course, the United States tech has a foothold in Europe, and of course we now know how much tech and social media does indeed influence our lives in the modern world. Who do you think is right in this scenario? Of course, the United States is protected by the First Amendment, which of course is free speech. However, there are restrictions when it comes to hate speech within the European Union. And so the United States has put in sanctions on EU officials for policing this. How do you think this might develop? And do you think that the United States was right for placing sanctions upon these officials?
Good morning, Thomas, to you. First of all, let's be direct. Is the United States right? No, but fully understandable. And this is a case where the censors themselves are being censored. Now, the ban is on 5 EU bureaucrats. Let's bear in mind that none of these officials have been elected. They've all just been given positions in EU organisations, in this case the digital services industry. So they're unelected, and they have definitely imposed censorship on a certain viewpoint emanating from US social media platforms. And if that viewpoint doesn't interact or is similar to their own ideology, then they come down hard on those US platforms. The ideology that they seek and have successfully striven to censor is the, let's say, the conservative pro-Trump bloc. But in Europe themselves, they've been quite happy to allow hate speech on digital platforms, which, for example, is can be construed as anti-Semitic, anti-Judeo-Christian values. So those being censored themselves are guilty of censorship, and they are coming from one viewpoint which they do allow, and in many instances, numerous instances I should say, is hateful speech, but as long as it's ideologically connected to their own view of the world, that's acceptable. As soon as the hate speech in their view, comes from those platforms, individuals, organisations, etc., politicians, that is at odds with their view of the world, then that's when they come down hard. So we do want to see free speech globally, and we do want to see hate speech stamped upon, but we must be consistent. And unfortunately, I think it's the 5 EU officials who've been not given visa rights, only look at it from one particular ideological angle, which is a very, let's say, left-wing, progressive, anti-Zionist, some might even say anti-Semitic, anti-Trump bloc. So if we had consistency, all well and good. We don't, and I think that's why the Trump administration is behaving as it is.
How damaging is this for US and EU relations? Of course, we've seen a bit of a down spiral when it comes to the relations between Europe overall, really, and the United States. Of course, in Donald Trump's national security strategy, he's labelled Europe as being invaded and raised all sorts of alleged problems with the continent. Do you expect further movements from the Trump administration when it comes to sanctioning European countries, fellow members of NATO, of course, and when it comes to these bans against current and former European officials?
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. The US-EU relations are at a very low point, very low ebb, mainly based on two issues. The first one is three issues, I should say. The way the EU have supported and not supported Ukraine. In other words, given political support to Ukraine, but at the same time buying Russian oil, so prolonging the war. The second thing is the way the European NATO allies contribute so little to NATO, and the US has borne that burden for decades. And the third thing is the way Trump has clamped down on administration and the way the EU have not. So those three issues, which Trump has specified, have really brought the relations down to a very low ebb. The banning of these 5 unelected bureaucrats, frankly, will do no further harm to relations to what is already done. They're 5 people, most of whom Europe hasn't even heard of. They may have heard of Thierry Breton, but certainly the other 4 characters are just really minor. They might have important roles in the organisation they're in, but they're certainly minor bureaucrats of no particular importance. So what I'm saying to your question is that relations won't deteriorate further just because the Trump administration has put a ban on these 5 individuals. They're already at a very low ebb, and the only way they will improve is if Trump sees that Europe are improving their policies towards immigration, more defence spending, etc.
Yes, Peter, do stay with us as we have further news updates coming for our viewers.